no, sort of, maybe they don't know about quantum mechanics, but they accept it as a valid, explanation. But, when you say I'm at the Media Lab, you have the challenge to explain it a little bit more. So when I started thinking about the word media, I said, well, there's a lot of ways that people think about this word, a lot of meanings. One of them is about, journalism or newsprint. For example, someone in a biology lab is going to think as media as something that you put in a plate in which you're going to grow cells. It's very different meanings of the word. But for me, the thing that kept on coming back to me was this idea of oil on canvas. So when you go to a museum and you see a beautiful painting like this one, what basically you get is a tiny description on the side of it, and that tiny description is going to give you the name of the painting, the name of the artist, maybe the year and the place where it was painted, and it's going to tell media. And it's going to say, in this case, oil on canvas. So it occurred to me that if I were to understand the word media, I had to ask the following question. The question was, what would happen if I would remove the oil and the canvas? What do I get if I remove the oil and the canvas? Now, what is this a media for, then? And if I remove the oil and the canvas, it is very clear there's nothing physical left. There's nothing physical left to the painting. So this must be a media for something non-physical. And then it dawned on me that actually what the media is a vehicle for knowledge. So what oil and canvas are actually embedding here is the perspective that Van Gogh had. It is the technique that he had developed, and the way that he saw the world, and how he was, putting that together in these wonderful compositions. So we can take this idea further, and let me give you another example of how we can think of media in general as vehicles for knowledge. So I'm going to start with a very different character that was not so far in history, which is Michael Faraday. So Michael Faraday, many probably of you have heard of. He was one of the greatest scientists of the 19th century. And he's responsible for helping unify magnetism, electricity, and light. So he built on the work of others, like many great scientists do. For example, he built on the work of Ørsted and Ampere, who had shown that if you take electricity and you put it in a coil, you can actually get, a magnetic field. And he was the one that showed that you could do the opposite. You could jiggle a magnet in front of a coil and get electricity out. And that's the main way that we still make electricity. And finally, late in his life, he was able to show that if you take a light beam that is polarized in a certain way and you put a magnet in the right geometry, you can get that to turn. So he was able to join these three different things: magnetism, electricity, and light. But the thing is, he didn't stop there. He also embedded this knowledge into some media. This is Faraday's media. He's the inventor of the electric motor. So Faraday did not only discover the connection between electricity, magnetism, and light, he was also able to put all this together in a device that would make that knowledge, would package that knowledge in a form that can be shared. You can use an electric motor without needing to know Faraday's laws, but by using an electric motor, you're having access to Faraday's laws. Okay? So now, when you think of it that way, every product, everything that makes up our wonderful world can be seen in much more poetic terms. You can think of a vacuum cleaner, as a work of art that, is Faraday laws, and they're embedded on metal, rubber, and plastic. Or you can think of a harp as Pythagoras' laws on wood and string. You can think of a kitchen blender as, yet another form in which Faraday laws are mixed with, ideas of mechanical engineering and design to create, this product. So you can think of media as a knowledge vehicle. And this knowledge vehicle can go from the arts to the science to the technology. So now the question becomes, how do you mediate knowledge? How do you get knowledge into the knowledge vehicles? And that's a little bit of like what everyone is trying to do. Either if you're trying to write a book or you're trying to invent something, you're trying to get knowledge into knowledge vehicles. So the first part of this question is a little bit simple, is, well, you first get it into people. To get the knowledge into the knowledge vehicle, you need to get it into people. But there is a problem with this. That is that getting knowledge into people actually is kind of hard. So let me give you an example to try to tell you what I mean by being hard. Assume that you just got an infection on one of your dental nerves. Okay? So your tooth is really aching really bad. Okay? And I'm going to ask you, what would you rather have access to in such situation? Would you rather have access to a nice and well-written article on root canal surgery, or a dentist? Probably you want a dentist, yeah? Because the knowledge matters when it's embedded into the people. It's not knowledge floating around. It's not an article describing, how root canal surgery is performed. It's the idea of root canal surgery and the procedures being internalized in a nervous system of a person that probably took 30 years for that person to accumulate all of that knowledge, to be able to be comfortable enough that you're going to open your mouth and you're going to let them destroy it and rebuild it. Okay? Now probably you just don't want a dentist. You want a dentist with his or her equipment. Because obviously the dentist, by using his or her equipment, he's getting access to knowledge on metallurgy, for instance, that was used to build those tools, knowledge on the mechanics of the chair, knowledge on x-rays that was used to generate the diagnosis. So actually, the dentist is operating at this higher level of knowledge. He's not building his own tools. Why? Because it took him 30 years to become a dentist, from the time that he was born, to the time that he was able to start performing surgery. So therefore, embedding knowledge into people is very hard, and it requires a lot of work. And what that implies is that each one of us can hold very little knowledge. It's a very humbling thought, because the world is very big, and we all can get to know very little, because knowing means being able to know to a level in which you can do it. So that brings us to what I think is one of the most fundamental problems, of our modern world, which is that the modern world requires us to make products and services and to deliver different things that require volumes of knowledge that are really, 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 really large. Okay? But we can fit very little. So I say that the amount of knowledge that we can fit is 1 person byte. I put it like in units of people. We can fit 1 person byte of knowledge, but we have to make products that require people bytes of knowledge. So how do we solve this problem? And the way that I think we solve this problem is by actually modularizing this knowledge, putting it into chunks, and distributing it through networks. This could be firms, they could be organizations, they could be markets. So this actually also gives you a different way of thinking about markets and different way of thinking about the economy. In one way, markets are not what make us richer, are what makes us wiser. The next time that you go to a pharmacy store and you buy a tube of toothpaste, think that you're not buying paste on a tube. What you're actually buying, is access to the knowledge on the synthesis of sodium fluoride that resides in the mind of somewhere, far from you, and that is connected to you through that product. So you're getting access to that person's knowledge. When you buy a bicycle, you're getting access to the knowledge of someone that knows how to cast metal and to shape metal. That's what you're buying access to. So the market is making you wiser, it's allowing you to reach and operate at a much higher level of knowledge than the one that you're currently operating. Organizations are what make us smarter, because when you modularize and chunk this knowledge, you need to keep it coherent. Like if you put all pieces that do not match, you're not going to get something out. So you need to have, the parts of the knowledge that need to interact the most to be close to each other, to be in organizations that could interact. And that's why organizations have some forms and have, some forms that actually are pervasive and that exist throughout the system in different variations. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about is that although this is a very fundamental problem, it's not a problem that we were born with. We were not born into the people byte age. And if you go back to our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, they lived in a very different world. Our great-great-grandparents actually lived in a world in which the knowledge that exists in society and the knowledge that they were able to hold were not very different. So sure, in a primitive society, they knew about the animals that they hunted, and they knew about which plants were toxic and not toxic, but most people could know most of the things that were to be known. There wasn't a big division of knowledge. But knowledge is very leaky. So in that primitive society, if I found that Joey found a way of making that spear sharper, by, like hitting it with a stone in a certain way, probably that knowledge, I'm going to be able to get that knowledge, and, now there's 2 people that know, it's going to start leaking, and eventually knowledge is going to accumulate. So there's this cumulative, idea in culture. And then you're going to go into a world in which there are organizations and there are cities that are going to merge and so forth. And at some point, you're going to keep on accumulating knowledge. You're going to share it with others. You're going to go beyond the person byte level. But sooner or later, there's going to be so much knowledge that organizations that are these vessels of knowledge, are going to start getting full. There's so much knowledge that you can put in an organization. you have an organization with hundreds of thousands of people, adding another 100,000 people probably doesn't increase the amount of knowledge that you're going to be able to hold by 50%. There are redundancies, people need to communicate, so they're kind of like diminishing effects of like how much information you can actually accumulate in a certain amount of people, in a certain network of people. So I think we're moving into a world in which actually we're beyond, the amount of the cognitive limit of an organization. We live in a world in which we are networks of firms, networks of organizations. And let me recap this last thought before I give the stage back to Joy, by summarizing it in this nice curve. It's very conceptual, but the idea is that here you have the total stock of knowledge in the world in the y-axis. And on the x-axis you have time. So from our great-great-great-grandfathers to our children. And knowledge has been increasing all over that period. But there are certain limits which are important. The first one is the limit of a single individual or a person byte. When what we know collectively surpasses what we can actually, fit inside our heads. At that point, if you are below that level, if you got new information, you have a very close IP policy. You want to keep it secret. Why? Because that is going to make you king of the tribe. If you find a better way of, of killing that deer, or you find a better way of raising those crops, that's going to be very valuable information. But it's very leaky because other people can hold it. But you're going to hit sooner or later a limit in which there's more to know that you can know, and you're going to start having incentives to share that information with others. So you're going to go into a transition of a world of firms. A world of firms in which, now organizations are the ones that embed the knowledge, and you have a big incentive for sharing things within your firm, but not outside your firm. Because the other firm would actually embed that knowledge and put it inside their organization as well. But sooner or later, we're going to run out of this capacity as well, and organizations are going to become small, and we're going to go into the network of organizations. And here, it could be that the barriers that we have developed in our previous life, in our previous time in evolution, actually act as friction more than as enabling. And with that thought, I would like to leave Joy, to tell a little bit of what these ideas, what these thoughts means to you, means to us, and means to our interaction.